Manny in Brooklyn. Thanks for calling again. What's up?
Hi, Dr. Brown.
Hey.
You told me I should call after reading your book, The Real Kosher Jesus.
Well, wonderful. So you got it and you read it.
I read it basically in one day. To be honest, what I didn't really read fully was the footnotes.
All right.
I hope I didn't really miss anything there. I read some of them, but
yeah. So tell me your thoughts as an Orthodox Jew. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, the main interesting thing I saw in your book was the chapter, "The Secret of the Invisible God Who Can Be Seen."
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're making the argument that just like there's nothing idolatrous in believing in a concept of a Shekhinah, a divine presence, or in a temple, or in how many Hasidic Jews believe in the idea of Elikus, that everything is made out of divine essence.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong about believing Jesus is a Shekhinah, a proto-Shekhinah, or a greater Shekhinah, so to speak. Is that the argument?
Yeah, I mean, that would be an analogous thing, that just as the Shekhinah was the manifest presence of God on the earth, and yet did not exhaust the fullness of God as God remained enthroned in heaven and filling the universe, that as one rabbi said to me decades ago, that Jesus was like a walking Shekhinah, that the presence of God was indwelling a human being, and that God was manifest in the life of a human being. The Word became flesh. So yeah, it's not meant to be exact and precise, but rather to take a Jewish concept and to say, hey, maybe from that concept you can understand how we believe in God's complex unity. He sits enthroned in heaven, he fills the universe, he works among us by his Spirit, and he can manifest himself for a season in a human body.
I just don't see how it solves the problem, though, because nobody worships the Shekhinah. Nobody really worships the tabernacle or the Sefirot. I mean, like or the Memrah of the God. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Philo worship the Logos? I mean,
right. So Philo's understanding of Logos is similar to what John says, but not exact. But let me ask this: how many gods do you worship?
One.
One. Okay. Is the Shekhinah God?
No.
Not God. Okay. So it's the manifest presence of God. So when Hasidic Jews pray for the reunification of the Holy One, because the Shekhinah is in exile with his people, so if it's the manifest presence of God, what is it?
It's an expression. It's everything is an everything that's not God, the infinite God, is just an expression of him. So like when the cloud of glory came down by the times of Moses, right, or the pillar of fire, that's just the expression of God's being, of God's existence. But it's not something that should be worshipped. It's just something to be expressed.
Okay, so right. So to understand this, then let's just try to work through some examples. So in Genesis 18, where the most plain reading of the text is that the Lord himself appears to Abraham along with two angels. One of the three men clearly seems to be the Lord himself, and Abraham has an extended conversation with him, and when they're done, he walks away. Was that God in the flesh or not?
I don't know what you mean by God in the flesh. To give a parallel example, you have like Numbers chapter 12, where it talks about God coming down in a pillar of a cloud. Was that God in the pillar of cloud? I mean,
well, it does say about the pillar of cloud that the Lord spoke to him face to face, like in Exodus 33, as a man speaks with his friend. But it's just you have three people. It says that Adonai appeared to him, right? Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appeared to him, and that it's clear that you have, once you get to the end of the chapter, beginning the 19th, that one of the three men that came was the Lord himself. The other two were angels, and that Abraham's taught, the Lord's talking directly, shall I withhold from Abraham what I want to do? So was that one that the scriptures identify as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Lord himself, who has a conversation with Abraham and Sarah, and then an extended conversation with Abraham, and he's called the judge of all the earth, etc. Abraham's talking to him. Was that God in human form?
I don't know exactly what you mean by God in human form. I mean, If you mean it was an expression of God in human form, then yes.
Well, what's an expression of God? Do you talk to an expression of God? Does an expression of God give promises? Does
Yeah. Well, why not? I mean, you again, when you have the pillar of cloud coming down in Numbers chapter 12, and the pillar of cloud sends messages and stuff like that.
But the cloud is not called. The cloud is not called the Lord, whereas this man in Genesis 18 is called the Lord.
Well, yeah, but it does say God came down in a pillar of cloud. So, what big of a difference is it? Just and then it just calls him by his name from then on, doesn't it?
Okay. So the fact that you're saying that's an expression of God in human form.
The basic reading of the text would read that way, yeah. And,
okay, an expression of God in human form. All right. So you worship God, you don't worship the expression.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. So this expression of God in human form is Yeshua. We don't worship the physical body, but we worship the God who expressed himself through Yeshua.
Well, I hope that's the case, but then it kind of, the whole pump of the Trinity, then kind of, it seems like it's just gone, like it seems you could also reconcile the opinions of the early church fathers who said, well, Jesus was he created or was he co-eternal? You could say, well, his essence was co-eternal, but his body was created, and it kind of just fades away.
Well, no, it doesn't, because we're saying God is complex in his unity, and he reveals himself through his Son. So, for example, in Exodus 24, on Mount Sinai, where it says they saw the God of Israel, and they ate and drank, and he didn't put forth his hand to hurt them. So in other words, they should have died because they saw God, and no one can see God and live. But he didn't strike them. It doesn't say a vision. They saw the God of Israel, and they ate and they drank. Did they see God or not?
Well, I would take Maimonides' approach, which in the Memrah, where he says that the word seeing in Hebrew could also mean understanding or envisioning. The same way when you have in like Genesis, I think it's chapter 3, maybe chapter 2, I think chapter 3, where it talks about Adam and Eve, that their eyes were open and they realized that they were naked. I mean, they knew they were naked beforehand. The only difference was they understood that they're doing something wrong.
Well, why would God say, come up on the mountain, and then it says they saw him, they ate and they drank, he didn't strike them? Why would he just strike them if they had a spiritual understanding? I mean, can you see how your theology is now dictating and changing the plain meaning of the text, which is one of my issues with traditional Judaism?
Well, I think we all agree that there's anthropomorphism in the text. But regarding coming higher to the mountain, I mean, there are also concepts of not just envisioning and sitting back and being a philosopher, but actually doing something in Judaism. So we do have to have a temple. We do have to offer sacrifice. We do have to do mitzvot. We have to do commandments. So it's not just that it has to just be sitting in your bedroom and just having visions of God.
Okay.
You actually have to do something.
But
regarding the eating and drinking, Maimonides understands that as meaning that they were not actually taking it seriously. When you're understanding a vision of God, you shouldn't be just doing regular mundane things. You should be totally focused on it.
And you
it's kind of like eating in a classroom.
So you really think that they could go on Mount Sinai, have this revelation of God, and they're just kind of chilling? Does that even make sense, his reading of the text? Isn't it more saying that they had a communal meal in his presence and weren't killed?
No, because I don't think it's a communal meal. I think it's that they were kind of chilling, and that's what God was upset about them for.
And so does the text anywhere say he was upset? It says he didn't strike them.
Right. Well, why would he strike them?
Because you're not allowed to see God, and he gave them the privilege of seeing God. So in other words, you're saying...
well, then it's kind of a dud to me. I think it's more like that they angered him, and despite that, he didn't strike them.
All right, so just to be clear, it says they saw God, but they didn't really see him, correct?
No, the word "seeing" in the Hebrew Bible many times means understanding, gaining wisdom.
But how could they express, if God wanted to express that they literally saw him, how else would he have said it?
He would take away certain concepts that he talks about, saying that he has no form.
But they describe, but he has a form. We know he has a form.
Right,
Numbers 12. Numbers 12. No, it doesn't say he doesn't have a form. It said you didn't see the form. Deuteronomy 4 says you didn't see the form. All right, stay right here. We got to continue this But you're going to have a break. Grab your Tanakh if you have it and look at Numbers 12, okay? And see what it says about Moses and the Tmunah of the Lord. All right, see what it says about Moses seeing the form of the Lord. So Numbers 12, it says that Moses saw the Tmunah of the Lord. So the Bible doesn't say that God doesn't have a form, but that the Israelites as a whole at Mount Sinai didn't see it. But what do you do with that it says Moses saw the form of the Lord?
Well, I don't think, first of all, Numbers 12 is necessarily the place I'd go to talk about that God did not have a form. I probably look at somewhere, probably in Isaiah chapter 40, somewhere in that source where it says that what type of demus would you give to God or something of that sort. But about Numbers 12, I would assume that it's talking about him. It's talking about Moses seeing God's back in Exodus 33.
Right.
And that I believe that is that it's anthropomorphic. That you can't see the face, which is a much more clear indication of what a person's feelings are or emotions are. But you could only see their back. You could only see a general outline, and that's the basic concept. You can't see God in His fullness. A finite can't not understand someone who's infinite, but he could understand aspects of him.
So let me ask you this: if I'm just reading the text itself, you think I'd come to the conclusions of a Moses Maimonides?
You might. I mean, Moses Maimonides really actually said that the reason he doesn't believe God has a form is just because from a philosophical argument that just
exactly.
the infinite cannot become finite.
In other words, he was a rationalist applying rationalistic arguments, and as you know, some of his books were burned as heretical by other Jews of his generation.
Yeah, and till today, people tell me not to read it. I mean,
right. And of course, he's the Mishnah Torah and Sefer Mitzvot and all these are standard works in Memrah Nevuchim, as you mentioned. The guide for the perplexed. But the fact is, all I'm saying is, I'm just going by what the text says, reiterated over and over, like Isaiah 6, where he sees the Lord, he thinks he's going to die because he sees the Lord. He's been in the presence of the holy God. And we know that no human being can see him in his fullness. And that's the whole thing, that the Son makes him known. So how do we put these together? That we say that God is complex in his unity. There's one God and one God only. The Father, the source of all things, remains hidden in glory. New Testament plainly says no one has seen God or can see God. John 1 and 1 Timothy 6 and other passages. He dwells in unapproachable light, which no one can see. But we see plainly he is seen many times. He's seen in bodily form in Genesis 18. He's seen on Mount Sinai in Exodus 24. He's seen in Isaiah 6 by the prophet and these other passages. And then you mentioned Exodus 33, you only see my back. And it says it literally says the Lord passes by. The Lord passes by and declares who he is, his very essence and nature, which seems more than his back, to be honest, in terms of if you want to make it philosophical. And now we just see through the person of Yeshua that the expression of God, the Logos, the Memrah, the word of the Lord, takes on human form. So God does not cease being God. He remains God enthroned in heaven, but he takes on human form through his Son and walks among us. And when you talk about an expression of God, I mean, that is part of what John 1 says, that the word, the Memrah, the Logos, became flesh and walked among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory is the one and only of the Father.
Okay, but then why stop there? Keep going. I mean, you have many passages in the Old Testament that indicate that God could be many other things. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 24 says, "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire."
Mm-hmm.
So why not just say that God is a fire? After all, that's what came down on Mount Sinai. I mean, we could say Ein Sur Kelokenu. There is no rock like our God. So God is a rock, and then we could pull out some Talmudic passages that talk about the Evan Shasia, the rock that is in the center of the world, that all creation came from, and we could just keep building and building that more complexity in God's unity. I mean, why do you stop at 3?
Well, it's not okay. Number one, you're talking about the many different ways in which God could reveal himself, or what he could speak through. He could speak through a storm. He could speak through an earthquake, right? He could speak in many different ways. He could speak through a voice. So there are many different ways in which God can speak and reveal himself, but who he is in terms of his very essence. It doesn't say if you saw the fire that you saw God in terms of a communal, relational way, like Genesis 18, where God communes with Abraham. But we get Father, Son, and Spirit from other passages. I mean, we see that God is unseen, yet we see He is seen, and then we see the activity of the Spirit, the Ruach, which is clearly not just power, because the Spirit teaches, the Spirit guides, the Spirit speaks, the Spirit can be grieved. So based on the evidence of Scripture, we say God has made Himself known to us as Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, made known as Father, Son, and Spirit. But what is it fundamentally that you object to? In other words, why couldn't that be true?
Well, what do you mean why it can't be true? I mean,
as a Jew, why must you reject that as a Jew?
Well, because that is a big problem in saying that God is not fully one. I mean, if you're saying that there are parts to something, it cannot be infinite. That's just a classic proof. So there's something just nonsensical. Actually, just while we were talking about Maimonides, if you look at Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, there's no commandment there to believe in a God. There's only a commandment to, one of the principles to believe what God does, that He controls the whole universe, that He's one, that He has no body or whatever it is. The concept is that belief in God is just a very pure rationalistic thing to me. That the way that I know there's a prime cause, unmoved mover, is just so basic that I just can't see and accept the doctrine that fuzzes stuff up.
Why is it fuzzy? I mean, you have no problem with Shekhinah, Memrah, Sefirot.
Shekhinah is not God. Shekhinah is an expression of God, like I am. I'm an expression of God. I mean, in Kabbalah, they say that I'm also a Memrah of God. That all of physical creation is a Memrah of God.
But that's not. But did you create the universe? Because according to the Targums, the Memrah created the universe. Can I worship you as God? Because according to Genesis 28, Jacob says that the Memrah of the Lord will be my God.
Yeah, but again, the idea of Memrah of the God in Kabbalistic ideas is that the Memrah creates different things, and those words still are in it. That means the essence of the thing are the words. But
only God is creator. There's only one creator. See, the funny thing is you're willing to have all these idolatrous views where you become somewhat godlike, whereas I'm trying to emphasize there's one God and one God only, and you're finding God in all these pieces and places.
No, I don't want to be worshipped. I don't want anyone worshiping the Shekhinah. I don't want anyone worshiping rabbis. I don't want anyone worshiping the temple. I want people to just, worship the God of Israel. That's all. The infinite being, the unmoved mover. That's all.
Oh, okay. So that's the only one I worship. And as He's revealed Himself, that's the only one I worship. I'd die before I'd worship anyone other than Him. So in Exodus 25, where God gives instructions to Moses, and Moses tells the people of Suli Mikdash v'shachanti v'tocham, and have them make for me a sanctuary v'shachanti, and I will dwell in their midst. Yeah. Didn't God Himself actually dwell in the midst of His people?
Again, your whole concept of dwelling God fills the heavens and the earth. We know that from Jeremiah 23.
But what does it mean that He dwelt? Right. But what does it specifically mean?
The concept of Shekhinah or Shachin is that God will rest His presence. Of course, it's used in words saying, "I will dwell here." I mean, that's constantly used.
But it was holy ground, literature. Though. You couldn't mess with it, or you would die, because the very presence of God.
If you mess with something that's expressing God more than something else, then you're trying to distort the expression, and that's dangerous. So if I walk into my house and I'm impure, that's not a problem. But if I did it in the temple, it's a problem, because I'm trying to defile and make something that's supposed to be expressing holiness and just express it as mundane.
But the presence of God is not God.
No, I mean, no. The same way the heavens and the earth is not God.
But the heavens and the earth are not God's presence. He reveals His glory through them, but they're not His presence.
Right. Because He fills the heavens and the earth, but that's the same concept applies to anything else. Angels as well. I mean, anything that's not the infinite, that has a form, that has a limit, cannot be God. It could be an expression of God, but it can't be God. I mean, to be honest, I guess I shouldn't condemn you as an idolater. I think I should condemn you as someone who has mathematical paradoxes. how could the infinite be divided? That's the problem.
He's not divided. He's one God. Why?
Infinite...
So, Manny, don't you think it's problematic that you're trying to squeeze God into your little brain or my little brain, that we're trying to wrap the eternal God, the one Isaiah 57:15, Shekhinah, and inhabits eternity, the one who's from Olam to Olam, so eternal, no beginning and no end, that you're trying to squeeze him into little human mathematical philosophical formulations that fallen people have come up with? I mean, doesn't that trouble you? Isn't that?
No, not at all, because mathematics is, to me, a science that there's no argument about. I put it this way. I could argue with you about Isaiah 53, and we could argue about interpretations, and you could probably, like we did with Alma and Basula last time, and you could agree that I have a point here, and I could agree you have a point there. But with mathematics, we can't argue 2 + 2 = 5, and I say, well, you have a point here, you have a point there. It doesn't work that way.
So are you, all right, so the Sefirot, so 10 Sefirot, and you know how far that can get in Kabbalistic language and all of that. It's just talking about one. God. It's just talking about one God. Well, and when the Kabbalah talks about God being 3 and yet 1, you don't have a problem with that.
No, I don't have a problem with the Talmud saying Yisrael v'Yaraisa v'Kuchabrichu Chadhu, that Israel and the Torah and God is all one. When you talk about the Sefirot, actually, it would be good if someone would look at the Tikkunei Zohar that usually people say in prayer before the Mincha service before Shabbos, that it says there that all these 10 Sefirot cannot be separated one from another. It's just not possible.
Right. So Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, and God has made himself known to us as Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, and it explains these many texts. So I worship one God and one God only. I don't worship a physical expression or a physical building, but I worship the one God. Hey, listen, we'll have to continue the conversation, and I'm happy to do it in the future. You can gladly call in again, or if you're genuinely interested in interacting more, we could talk off the air. You know how to contact us. But bottom line, I just, when the text says they saw God, or God spoke, or that, I take it literally, and the response of the people also would indicate that it was literally God. But hey, if you understand Yeshua as the expression of God in human form, the Word made flesh, we're at least on a track that we can continue to talk about. Hey, thank you for calling.